Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, So Grow Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. So trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of So Grow Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Are you a nonprofit professional who's feeling overwhelmed and burnt out? Well, welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast. I am your host, Haley Cooper. On this podcast, we will share stories of leadership, courage, and empathy that'll help you learn to take care of yourself, your staff, organization, and community. You will hear from nonprofit leaders who have been in your shoes and have learned best practices to raise more revenue and make a greater impact. Let's thrive together. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. Today we have the incredible, amazing Tania Bhattacharyya with us. And if you know her, you know how amazing she is. I cannot say enough good things about her, and I just love being in her presence. So I'm so thankful that she said yes to be on my podcast. She is the founder of Lumos Marketing, a thought leadership consultancy for social impact entrepreneurs ready to stand out as they stand up for their mission. She offers personal brand messaging, storytelling, and community building strategies for LinkedIn, along with coaching to dismantle imposter thoughts. Well, welcome, Tania. Let's get into it.
Yes, thank you so much, Haley, for having me. This is really a treat. And you and I have been friends for a long time, and I've gotten to watch you grow in your entrepreneurial journey, and it has been such a wonderful thing to watch. So this is going to be great. I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, we're just two friends chatting. There you go. Could you start by sharing what inspired you to delve into this world of personal brand messaging and community building on LinkedIn?
I think so many of us end up helping others with the journey we went through ourselves. So when I was in the nonprofit world, which is how we met, I worked for a women's addiction treatment program here in Orange County where we live. And I was there for 12 years, and I started working there right out of college, right out of UCI. And for a long time, I was in the background, which is where I wanted to be, right? I was backstage. I was coordinating fundraising events. I was researching donors. I was in the back making things happen. And I was very happy there. And as I grew in the organization, I realized that I was going to have to become more of a face of the organization. And this was something that was both shared with me by wonderful mentors and board members and such, and something that I just intuitively knew. But I didn't know how to do that because not just culturally, I come from a background where it was really taught to me, be humble to a fault, be seen and not heard, maybe don't be seen in the first place. And really well-meaning folks, as I grew up, instilled messages that were really opposite to what it takes to be successful to build a brand and get visible. But I was lucky enough to be able to watch the patients that we served grow in their recovery journey. And I got to watch them start to share their recovery story with other women and just become visible as advocates for mental health and recovery as a part of their own journey. And that was really inspiring, right? Every time I saw somebody take the stage at our fundraiser and talk about their story, I was like, wow. And I realized that I had a story to tell. And we all have a different story to tell. But what I know for sure is that when we share that story, there's at least one other person out there who is going through something similar who maybe needs to hear it, and for whom that story can inspire them to change their hearts, to change their minds, to take that next action. And so it was a very slow process, Haley. It wasn't overnight. It took a lot of time to get comfortable with doing this. And it was like getting 1% more uncomfortable with each action. Maybe it was sharing a LinkedIn post. And then the next time it was sharing a LinkedIn post with a picture. And then the next time it was sharing a LinkedIn post and then reaching out to somebody. And it took years to get to where I am today, but I wouldn't have it any other way because I think this work is incremental. I feel like I've just been rambling. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. You did great. Thank you so much for giving that background and kind of the evolution of starting in a nonprofit and hearing these stories of women recovering from addiction and really seeing the value of storytelling, not only of the people that you were serving, but as a leader, how that can influence the way that people support your organization. And you made a good point that it took that just hit publish, just hit send. And there is a lot of fear around being your own personal brand ambassador, whether it's on behalf of yourself or behalf of the organization. And that can come down to imposter thoughts and imposter syndrome. And like you said, do I have a story to tell? Is what I have to say important? Or who am I to show up in this space? And so that can be a significant barrier to both that personal and professional growth. In your coaching practices is one of the things that you focus on is dismantling these imposter thoughts. So can you share some key strategies or insights that you often recommend to individuals struggling with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I love this question. I'm highly influenced by an article that came out, now it's probably been about 3 years or so, but it's an article by Ruchika Tulshan and Jodi Ann Burey in the Harvard Business Review. It ended up becoming one of Harvard Business Review's like top 100 articles. And when I read it, it just changed everything for me. And the name of the article is Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome. And the concept of the article is pretty much around, even when we think of the term imposter syndrome, it's been pathologized. It's this thing that we have to fix about ourselves. And if only we could fix it and get more confidence, it would heal ourselves. But the reality is none of us were necessarily born with this thing. It's something that has been instilled in us. And in a lot of ways, these thoughts, these messages that we have internally, they are protective responses or protective responses that emerged as a result of just trying to survive these systems that we live in. And those systems are very varied, right? It could be family systems. It could be cultural systems, which I talked about earlier. Many people who joined the nonprofit world maybe came from the academia world. And in that space, I know you are very held to a certain standard and you have to speak a certain way. You have to write a certain way. You have to cite a certain way. Your messaging has to be just a very specific way. And if it doesn't fit inside that box, it's poo-pooed on. And so sometimes people who come from academia have a really hard time sharing those stories because they hear the voice of that mentor, that academic advisor who's telling them it's not good enough. In other cases, I come from the mental health nonprofit background. I've talked to a lot of therapists who had supervisors or professors who very much taught them like, hey, you're a therapist. You're not supposed to talk in this session. You're supposed to hear. You're supposed to bear witness. You're supposed to listen. And so as these therapists or therapeutic professionals begin to start sharing their stories on LinkedIn or wherever the case may be, they hear the voice of that supervisor telling them to be quiet, to listen. And so whatever the case may be, we all have our own voice that is just trying to protect us, that is just trying to do right by us. But the messages are mismatched for what we're actually trying to do now. So I think the very first thing I would do is begin to get clear on the messages that are coming up, what they're saying, and whose voices they are. Is it that academic supervisor? Who is that person who's sharing these voices with us? And can we get into relationship with that voice and remind it, thank you for trying to protect me. Thank you for trying to do right by me. I appreciate it, but we're actually going to do something different now. And this is why. I think one thing that we have in common is we think we're the only ones who struggle with it. Even though there's so much stuff out there about how everyone struggles with it, we still think that we are like the worst or that we struggle through it in a specific and special way. But the reality is so many of our counterparts feel the exact same way. They also fill in the blank, not fill in the blank enough to do XYZ. And so I think building a community is a really strong antidote to imposter thoughts because as you build up a cheerleading squad around you of people who are committed to your success, who have a shared vision, who are values aligned, those imposter thoughts start to go away because you've got a group of people around you who have got your back. I call this a campfire circle. Some people call it a personal board of directors. I have a friend who calls it their A team. You can call it whatever you want, but build a small, intimate group of support systems so that People have got your back and you've got theirs too. It goes both ways. How does that land with you, Haley?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think, I think you call it the itty bitty shitty committee that comes up. And like you said, it's there to protect us. But just by giving voice to it, it starts to heal that inner voice that needs to be heard, that wants to be heard. And so it allows us to give voice to it, understand it, and then be able to change those thoughts around it and rewrite those thoughts so that we can show up. And like you said, too, it's not just about us, it's also about giving voice to other people and making ourselves feel less alone. Because when we have those thoughts, it can feel really lonely. And the work that we do as social impact entrepreneurs can be really lonely. So showing this space that makes you less alone. And I love this idea of building your campfire circle. I have a personal board of directors that I've built. And when you talk, and I know that this is the name of your podcast, so it introduces this idea of replacing the traditional boardroom table with a campfire circle for leadership discussions. Can you talk a little bit more about how this idea originated and what do you believe the metaphor of a campfire circle brings to the table, both figuratively and literally?
I love this question so much. To be honest, Haley, like the idea, like sometimes I think the best ideas and concepts just pop into our minds when we are least expecting it. Like you and I were catching up earlier, and I know you've had a really busy day and you were just like zoning out and vegging out before this call, which I love. That is where the best ideas come to me, when I'm zoning out, vegging out. It's not necessarily when I'm in front of this computer, right? Anyway, that was a tangent. To answer your question, so I have a working definition for this concept of thought leadership, because thought leadership, it's like, what is that? Like people talk about it, but what the heck is it? So my working definition of thought leadership is that it's a consistent practice of using our passion, our lived experience, and our credibility as fuel to spark trust and community as we imagine and shape the future together for the better. Right? So it's essentially using the gifts that we already have to build community and change the world, right? And that's the outcome. That's the long-term emergent outcome of this work. And so when I think about sharing stories, sharing our lived experience, being together in community, the idea that came up for me first was a campfire circle. I think of a campfire circle in juxtaposition to a boardroom table, right? At a boardroom table, we all talk about getting a seat at the boardroom table, but it's like, why though? Like, why? There's only so many seats. And whereas a campfire circle, I feel like it can expand to as big as it needs to be. You can sit on a log, you can sit on the ground, you can like butt up and share a little spot. And so when I think of the campfire circle, I think of it as being inclusive. I think of it as being a space where ideas, brand new, visionary ideas are sparked and where we huddle together with our community. And to me, that's what this work of storytelling is about. That's really what it's about.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think a lot of time in our work, we don't take that time to pause and build that, not only that community, but that space to think outside of the work that we're doing, to create, to tap into that creativity. And I think you're saying this idea of a campfire circle allows you the space to do that.
Yes. Yeah. I love what you just said there. It's about imagination. I think that so many of us in social impact work are incredibly creative, are incredibly hardworking. We have so much heart. And I think one of the most important skills that we can have that is so rarely nurtured is that creativity and that imagination, because it's written off as woo-woo or just a waste of time, or, oh, we just don't have time for that. But those moments, like I said earlier, that's where the brand new idea for how things can be done comes up. That's how we build a new world. We have to use our imagination.
Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs, helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. So I've had a few people on the podcast and we've been talking about this idea of brand identity as an individual, but also as a leader of your organization. And I would love to know your thoughts on, as you're building out this thought leadership, how do you build it out? The conversations we've been having is like separating your identity from your organization so that your organization isn't reliant on you. So in the terms of this idea of thought leadership, as you're building up your own personal brand identity, as it relates to the work that you do, how do you separate the two, or do they go together?
They certainly go together, but they are separate as well. And sometimes I think founders often fall into a trap where they are very much the same. But I think for most people, it's going to be a little bit different. And so as you think about your personal brand identity, I think you do a lot of the same things that you do when you get into a session with a group that's dedicated to a nonprofit organization, which is you think about the vision that you personally have for the future. You think about your mission, which is like how you as an individual are going to get there. Is it through having a business? Is it through volunteering? Is it through creating a nonprofit? How are you going to accomplish that? I think it's about coming up with the values that you hold dear so that you can use that vision and those values to make decisions about who you're going to partner with, where you're going to build community, who you're going to show up in front of, who you're going to support, those kinds of things. So the actions I think are very related, but where I think they become separate, there's always going to be a dotted line. If you as a change maker work for an organization where your vision and your values are not aligned, where you can't make any kind of connection to the two, you might be in the wrong place. You might be in the wrong place. And so I'll share that I worked for an addiction treatment program and I learned so much there. And I personally don't have a story of recovery. I don't have the allergy to drugs and alcohol. Where I built my messaging and built my thought leadership brand around was when you heal women, you heal the world. It was almost less about the addiction treatment piece, although I could certainly speak to that as a fundraising professional. For me, where I really dug in my flag and really took a stand was we have to help women because they are underserved, they are swept aside, and they are fully stigmatized. So that's what I really got behind. Similarly, I think you can have a mission and a vision that is different than what the organization you serve, but you can find how you nestle in to your nonprofit's organization and fly that flag. But again, I do want to iterate, if you believe something that is very different or totally in opposition to what the nonprofit believes, I think you have a problem there. You might need to find a different organization.
Yeah, I think that's so important because as you're communicating about the organization, people can tell if your values aren't aligned. And I think, like you said, it is that important piece to do that level of self-reflection. What's important to you? What's your own mission? What's your values? How do you want to show up in this space? And really doing that deep dive into self-reflection. And we know that storytelling is a powerful tool. And I love how you reframe the work that you're doing in terms of healing women, healing the world. And obviously you emphasize, and the place you hang out is LinkedIn. So how can individuals effectively use this storytelling to enhance their personal brand?
Storytelling is so important. I think our stories are our most powerful tool that we have as change makers because they serve as a connection point and a bridge between our mission and our audience. We can share all the data in the world. There are so many issues happening in the world right now, and we can share in figures and then get really upset that people aren't doing something about it. But I think that it takes one person's story to be able to really dig in and change people's minds. And so I think there's a lot of ways we can share stories on LinkedIn. I think the first way is through our profile. I think a lot of people think of our LinkedIn profile as like a resume, but I would encourage people to think of your LinkedIn as a resource for the people you serve, not a resume. You can share your story in your about section. You have 2,800 characters to share, not your resume and the fact that you're a multifaceted multitasker or whatever a lot of these profiles say. But to speak about the problem that you solve, the transformation that you wish to create, the outcome of the work that you do, and how you first got introduced into this work yourself and what that was like, your line of demarcation in your life, right? Your defining moments and what your organization does, and maybe a little quote or a testimonial from a donor or a person served or whoever. You can begin to share your story in your profile. Of course, content is a place where you can share your stories. And I would say you can share your stories and reflections of how you intersect with your organization's work. So, for example, one of the posts that I remember I did when I was at the organization that I worked for was we would do trainings for our community, like mindfulness trainings and things like that. And so I remember I shared a story about how I learned a trick, a tip, if you will, that if you nuzzle up and cuddle your dog and listen to your dog's heartbeat, that can serve as a form of mindfulness if just sitting in a quiet room isn't doing it for you. And I remember thinking, oh, that is so good. And so I shared like a whole story around that. And so it was a personal story. It was a picture of me and my dog, but it shared an underlying thread of what we do at our organization and why it's helpful, why mindfulness is helpful in alleviating stress and living a healthier life. And so it was, yeah, I think that's one example. I think you can invite your colleagues to share their stories, right? Your donors, your board members. I think nonprofits are underutilizing their board members' LinkedIns tremendously. When you think about the people who serve on your board, more than likely they are well connected in the community. They're corporate leaders. They are serving on other boards. They are already networked with an audience that you want to meet more of. And so LinkedIn is such a powerful tool to activate these ambassadors and ask them to share a post about why they got involved in your organization. Maybe you can write it for them, or maybe they're going to write it, but it's just a really natural way to connect with others. Because again, LinkedIn was built as a social networking platform. We've all been in a prospecting session where we get a bunch of our donors together and ask them to come up with people that they know. LinkedIn does that work for us. It does that work for us because you're already connected to the people that you know. And so as you share your stories, these people find out what you're doing and they begin to read more about the organization and start to think about how they can get involved. So when that next ask comes up, that next event, that next whatever it is, that next community activation, they've already got the name of your organization in the back of their mind, and it's a much easier yes. Yeah. I'll stop there. How does that land?
Yeah, I love that. And I will always welcome pictures of you and Gary on LinkedIn. He's such a little sweetie. And I think you made a really good point about making your board ambassadors on behalf of your organization. If they share, then it goes to their network, and whoever they tag, it goes to their network. And so there is that community building aspect of getting exposure to your organization. And something you mentioned is starting with the About Me page. And obviously, we've done very many renditions of my About Me page. So if you go into my LinkedIn, you will see the most recent one. But what are some of the key strategies or like key things that people should include in their About Me section?
Yeah. I mentioned some of them earlier, like around, I always like people to start with the problem that they work on, because if it gets people to stop their scroll, it gets people to pay attention if they're the right person for you. If they are currently struggling with a version of the problem that it is that you solve, they're going to be like, I need to read more about this. Because the job of the beginning of your About section is to get people to keep reading, to get people to stop and read on. So I think start with the problem that it is that you solve, and then get into the unique ways that you provide solution, right? There's many different ways to skin a cat, if you will. And so if you take the umbrella of mental health, or you take the umbrella of climate change, or there's so many different umbrellas, and different nonprofits solve for those issues in unique ways. So speak to how it is that you do it uniquely, so that the people who can partner with you can find you and begin to think about how you two can intersect or coalesce. And then, of course, I think your personal story is a great thing to put in your About section. And this is going to take time, right? Like you said, this is going to take many different iterations. The first thing you put up there is not going to be it forever. You can change this as many times as you want, as often as you want. So just remember that. Like, something I often share with my clients is that you can't get this wrong. You cannot get this wrong. There is no wrong. If you are puttering around and working on your LinkedIn and thinking about how you want to present yourself to the world and share your brand, you are ahead of 99% of the population. LinkedIn is so underutilized and unsaturated. I just updated the number. I think I used to say 3%. I think now it's something like 5%. Only 5% of active LinkedIn users share their own content. So if you are on there sharing, talking about what it is that you're doing, reflecting on your work, you are ahead of 95% of the population. So just remember that. It doesn't have to be perfect. Try to get rid of this need for being perfect, because you're never going to get there. Nobody will ever get there. Instead, see if you can infuse play into it, right? Make it a game. Like, I remember when I used to play around with LinkedIn as a nonprofit ED, I'd make it a game. Could I reach out to 5 new potential friends this week? Could I share a story that got 2 people to reach out to me? Just make it fun, and then get yourself a little treat. I'm big on little treats. So if you share on LinkedIn that week, get yourself a little something. Like just make it fun. However you can make it fun. That's the key here. Because if it feels like a chore, you're not going to do it. But funny enough, it can be a really fun place to build community and just find your people.
Yeah, I feel like on the most part of every podcast, I'm like, I found you on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
In this day and age, it's not creepy anymore where you're like,
Right.
I follow you and I like your posts and whatever. Like, it is such a powerful place to build community. And it was cool last night. I led a board retreat and one of our board members encouraged us all to reach out to our new board members on LinkedIn and friend them. And this person was like, I felt so welcomed. I felt like I was included from the get-go. And so I know that you have a social selling framework. I don't know if you call it that anymore, but really how to build connections on leadership on LinkedIn to make it more than just transactional, right? Like I connect with you, maybe I'll like a post and not make it where I get sales in my inbox all the time. And it's like multiple emails of the same sale. So how do you encourage people to build authentic relationships on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I have a mentor, Becky. She was my boss for a long time at the organization I mentioned. And she used to call it being friends with your friends, which I thought was cute and funny. But that's like kind of what it is. It's like being friends with your friends. It's not just about sharing content. Like when I talk about LinkedIn, I do tend to talk about content and storytelling a lot. And there's a saying that content is king or whatever, but I don't agree with it. I really do think engagement and community building is king. Content is just a part of it. Let's see, what do I want to say about this? I think it's about being friends with your friends. So as you see people engaging with you, engage with them back, send them a message, see what they're up to, ask how you can support them, see what they're posting about, see if they've got an event coming up and see if there's any ways that you can authentically, genuinely support them. Reciprocity is a very real thing. So as you show up for other people, they will show up for you. Look at who's viewing your profile. It may seem like a creepy thing to reach out to the folks who have been viewing your profile. I promise you, you can do it in a non-creepy way, especially if you are a person who's out there doing good work and your LinkedIn profile shows that. It's only as creepy as you make it, right?
We are in 2024, so it's how we follow people nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. If you read an amazing article in the trade publication for your sector, if you listen to an amazing podcast episode and you're like, man, I really like that. I took so many notes. Reach out on LinkedIn and tell that person because so often everyone's just doing the best they can. Everyone's trying to, affect change in whatever way they can. And we don't always know how it's landing. So you taking the time to reach out and letting them know and building a connection on LinkedIn goes a really long way.
Yeah, I think that's definitely so important. And it's all about on the idea of social media, you think of transactional swipe and continue scrolling, but it is really important to build those authentic relationships because that is what nonprofits are all about. And I'm a fundraiser. So that's what fundraising is all about, right? Inviting people in, seeing how we can support one another. And in the terms of, if you think about nonprofit leadership, we're supporting people and living out their generosity through our mission, and they're helping us with their time, talent, and treasure. So it is a mutually beneficial relationship. And it's important to have those conversations and show up for one another. And this is a unique space to do so.
Yeah, 100%. And one thing that just came up to mind is I think sometimes we need to readjust our expectation of what the numbers will look like. Like sometimes I have noticed that people think, well, I'm only getting 3 likes on my stuff, or I'm only getting whatever on my stuff. So maybe it's not working and I just need to stop. But these vanity metrics are not a good read on whether or not your stuff is landing or not, because I have had many instances where I have gone out into the community, like a conference or back in the day, met up with a donor or a volunteer for coffee. And they were very attuned with what was going on at the organization. And they'd bring up a LinkedIn post that I shared. And I was like, wait a second, I didn't even realize we were friends on LinkedIn. Like you've never liked any of my stuff. It doesn't like click the like. But yeah, I think it's about a lot of this work around building trust and moving forward in a relationship is invisible. Like we actually can't see it when it's online. We are having a much larger reach and a much larger impact than we think. So don't stop just because it seems like people aren't clicking or looking. Like I promise you, people are watching. And so just keep going, keep going.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a good idea of building trust because we know that there have been reports about nonprofit trust on the decline. And so how does this idea of building personal thought leadership and a personal brand on LinkedIn help build that trust with your organization and help bring people in to achieve your mission?
Yeah, I love this conversation. This is a great thought exercise because trust to me is an emergent property of this work of thought leadership. As we go out into the world and share our perspective and our personality and our insights and our opinions, we build trust with the right people who are values aligned. I think a part of that is the consistency piece. As you show up in front of people's feeds over and over, not all the time, right? You don't have to share every day or anything. I have this thing called being lazy on LinkedIn, which is sharing once per week and then letting that be enough, especially as busy nonprofit social impact change makers. But as you show up consistently week after week over time, you just naturally begin to build trust, right? It's like that know and trust that a lot of people talk about in marketing. So I think just literally showing up it consistently is part of it. The other part of it, of course, is showing up in a way that's values aligned. It's sharing stories and insights that align with the ways that our audience see themselves and see the world. It's showing up in a way that makes people say, yes, I agree with that. I believe in that. I haven't thought about it that way before, but I agree. This is an organization that I can trust because we see the world in similar ways. So I think those two things are key. And then, of course, as you build trust, you're able to make asks in a different way, in a way where it's heard better.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And if someone is like listening to this and they want to craft some content for LinkedIn, what are some of the frameworks? Obviously, I've utilized these in working with you, but what are some of the frameworks you utilize to help hone in on the content? I know you have over 20 different ideas of how you could write content. But can you name like the top 3 that you would suggest to start crafting that content? If people are like, I want to do it, I want to post, but I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, one good place to start would be, and I don't know, Haley, if you're down for this, but I have a free resource of actually 14 free prompts to get you started on your LinkedIn thought leadership journey. So maybe we can stick that in the show notes or whatever. But I would get started with thinking about first, what is your story? And a lot of this you can use in your about section as well. So it's kill 2 birds with 1 stone, craft your story for your about section of your LinkedIn, and then actually make it a post as well, because not everybody's going to be checking out your profile. You want it to show up in the feed as well. So as you do that work of sitting down and reflecting back on like, why is it that I do what I do? How did I get started? Like, why am I so passionate about this? Share that. Another idea might be like, what is the root cause of the work that you do? How did we get here? And this is really a thought leadership post because it's you sharing your perspective and it can get a little spicy. Like, what is that deeper underlying reason for the issue that it is that you work on? I think another idea, there's so many things you could do. I think it's about also keeping up to date with the trends and the stories that are coming down the pike in terms of the news. If you work in mental health, what's going on in that world? If you work in the arts, what's going on in that world? What are the trends? And sharing your reflections, sharing your insights so that over time you become known as somebody who really has their finger on the pulse and somebody who really is like in it, who's in the mix, in the trenches and has a read on what's happening there. And here's the thing too, your reflections are your reflections. You can't get it wrong. Sometimes people are like, well, I think this is what's going to happen, but I don't really know. So I don't really want to say. None of us have a crystal ball. Like none of us know for sure what's going to happen, but you can share what you think is going to happen and inspire conversation, get people thinking. Those are 3 right off the bat, but there's so many different reflection questions. I think more than anything, it's about building a practice of when something happens in your world, taking the time to reflect on it. And maybe you set an hour a week or 30 minutes a week to start. Or all you do is just think about what happened over the last week. Think about the stories you encountered. Think about the news articles that came through. Just think about what's been going on in your world. And maybe you can do this as a leadership team at your nonprofit and just go around and just share a reflection. Just get into this habit. And maybe in the beginning, you're not sharing it on LinkedIn. You're just sharing it internally. But over time, that habit is going to serve you really well because it gets you in that practice of thinking in public, which then in turn attracts people in who want to be around that thinking.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we talk about on this podcast, like sharing reflections or creating space in your meetings that don't just go to outcomes, to let people be human, to let people share. And it creates that environment of what we said earlier, like safety and trust, where people like say, oh, I'm not alone, but I also trust you because you have now allowed me to show up as myself. And although it might be spicy, not something that I necessarily agree with, like we can have a conversation about it because you were so vulnerable enough to post this and you were so vulnerable enough to share that now we're bridging that connection with each other.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's such a beautiful thing to watch emerge. So many people are shocked when the first time this happens. They're like, wow, I shared this and it was scary and I didn't even know if anyone was going to read it. And all of a sudden I'm in conversation with this person that I've always wanted to chat with and we are like vibing. And that's the outcome of storytelling.
Yes, definitely. We love a good spicy post and and when it leads to all the good vibes. So do you have any last thoughts or advice for someone who might be listening to this and is still iffy or like, I don't know, and how they can really leverage this idea of personal branding and thought leadership to foster the community that they foresee for their mission?
What came to mind is that whether or not you want to have a personal brand or not, you have one because all it is your reputation. It's how people see you in the world. And so take control of how people perceive you in the world because you are awesome. You are amazing. You do this nonprofit work for a reason. And as you begin to articulate those things and share what it is that you believe in, the right people will take notice. And if you control the narrative of how you show up in the world, other people can't do it for you. So yeah, take control of it.
Oh, that's so good. Obviously, you're on LinkedIn, but where can people find you and the work that you do?
Yes, LinkedIn is definitely the best place. I also have a podcast, as we talked about, called the Campfire Circle. So you can find me there. And then finally, you can check out my website if you want. It's just lumosmarketing.co.
Well, thank you so much, Tania, for having this conversation with me. You are such a gift to me. And I know all of our listeners and everyone that you come into contact with, and you just inspire me every day.
Oh my goodness, Haley. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
If you have valued these stories or learned something from what you've heard, please share this podcast episode or follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support, and together we can build a better community and world.